My family slipped me documents so that I wouldn't use their name, but they didn't know I had a business. They say some people are born into the wrong family, and for most of my life, I've wondered if that's what happened to me. My name's Merritt, and in my family, that name never carried much weight. We were a family built on appearances, status, and money, or more specifically, on the business of luxury. My parents owned a chain of upscale watch and gemstone boutiques in several cities. You've probably walked past one if you've ever window shopped in an airport or downtown plaza. They were the kind of stores where people spent mortgage payments on timepieces they'd wear twice and then lock away. For my parents, the business wasn't just a livelihood, it was their identity. Our family name, Galloway, was stamped on velvet cases and gold-plated signage, and they wore that legacy like royalty. But to them, I was the crack in the crown. I didn't sparkle enough, didn't say the right things at dinner parties, and certainly didn't want to follow the path they'd laid out. It wasn't that I was lazy. I worked hard, in fact. But my world was mechanical, hands-on. I built custom bicycles. Not the kind kids ride or the ones you grab from the sporting goods store, but precision-engineered machines, sleek, balanced, and entirely bespoke. I designed and constructed high-end bikes for athletes, collectors, and creative clients who wanted something one of a kind. My customers weren't browsing discount racks, they were flying in from out of state just to test a frame I tuned myself. But if you asked my parents, I was the one who chose a hobby over the family business. It always came down to appearance for them. When I was little, I dreaded the formal galas and fundraising events. My brother Sterling and sister Eunice thrived in that space, dressed like catalog models, knowing exactly what to say and who to flatter. Meanwhile, I'd sneak away to the garage behind our house and tinker, disassembling flashlights, rebuilding old skateboards, sometimes losing track of time until my mother pulled me out by the collar. From an early age, it was clear that Sterling would inherit the business. He was being groomed, as everyone liked to say. He shadowed my father, memorized financial reports, and learned how to shake hands with people who wore too much cologne. Eunice married into a wealthy family from the East Coast and immediately became a rising star in her social circle, charity boards, wine clubs, you name it. Then there was Lowell, our youngest. The golden child by virtue of being the baby. Lowell could get away with anything. Failing grades? It was just a rough patch. Skipping family dinners? He was exploring his independence. Me? I was a disappointment cloaked in silence. I didn't crash or burn, I simply didn't follow their script. When I graduated college, a degree in industrial design they only paid for because they assumed I'd eventually come to my senses, I moved into a warehouse space an hour outside the city. At first, it was just me, some tools, and a whole lot of uncertainty. But people started talking. Orders trickled in, then flooded. Soon, I had a small team. My custom builds had a waiting list that stretched into next year. Some of my bikes sold for more than the watches in my father's display cases. But they didn't know any of that. Not really. To them, I was just Merritt, who does something with bikes. They thought I lived in a drafty studio and scraped by month to month. I drove a plain hatchback, wore clean but simple clothes, and skipped every family fundraiser I could get out of. In their eyes, that was proof of failure. Because in their world, success wasn't something you quietly built, it was something you wore on your wrist and parked in your driveway. I didn't care. Or at least, I told myself that. Then one day, I got a message from my father. No greeting. No context. Just 4 words. Family meeting. 7 p.m. Home. I sat with that message for hours. I figured it would be more of the usual, some veiled critique, maybe a backhanded invitation to reconsider joining the business. But something about the wording felt different. I went anyway. Their house hadn't changed. The same glossy floors, curated furniture, and a foyer that smelled like polished brass. Every part of it screamed wealth, but to me, it all looked strangely hollow. Too clean. Too perfect. When I stepped into the living room, they were all waiting. A perfect semicircle of expectations. Sterling in a blazer, Eunice with her phone barely concealed in her lap, Lowell sprawled across an armchair like he was waiting for a commercial break. My mom sat quietly to the side, clasping her hands together like she was hoping for a truce. And directly across from all of them was a single armchair. Empty. Waiting for me. It felt less like a meeting and more like a performance, and I was the finale. I sat. My dad didn't waste a moment. This family, he began, is more than just its name. It's a legacy. Sterling jumped in, using words like reputation management and long-term alignment. I recognized the pitch. They weren't speaking to me as family. This was a press release with chairs. Eunice, never one to be outdone, began speaking about social implications and how my choices, my career, my absence from events reflected on all of them. Lowell didn't say much. He didn't need to. The smirk on his face said it all. He was enjoying the drama, the attention, the spectacle. Then came the folder. Eunice slid it across the coffee table like it was a menu. "We had our attorneys draw this up," she said. "Inside? Legal documents." I skimmed them. It was all there: removal from the trust, formal disassociation from the business name, a clause ensuring I wouldn't speak publicly about the family brand. In short, they were cutting me out. Sterling said something like, "It's not personal." My father nodded solemnly, as if he were sending a soldier off to war. I didn't flinch. Instead, I asked, "Where do I sign?" The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Even my mother, who had barely spoken all evening, tried to interrupt. "Merritt, are you sure this is?" "Let's not drag it out," I said. "I've been expecting this for years." I signed. I stood. Dad's voice trailed behind me, "One day, you'll understand." I didn't turn around. I just said, "Maybe. But I'm not waiting around for it." And I left. The house. The name. The part of me that had been waiting for them to see who I was. By the time I pulled into the parking lot behind my workshop, I felt calm. Not angry. Not even surprised. More like a weight had been quietly lifted. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and hit the lights. That familiar hum of old fluorescent bulbs flickering to life never sounded better. The workshop was as I'd left it, orderly in its chaos, the smell of oil and metal heavy in the air. To most people, it would look cluttered. To me, it was peace. Tools hung neatly along the pegboard walls. 3 bikes in various stages of assembly stood in their racks. Parts were organized by material and purpose, every drawer labeled, every cabinet earned. This space was mine, not inherited, not borrowed. Mine. Ben, my assistant, was still there, finishing up a few client builds. He glanced up from the workbench, a wrench in one hand. "How'd it go?" he asked. "They disowned me," I said, setting my bag down and pulling on gloves. Ben froze. "Wait. What?" "Officially," I said, matter-of-factly. "They gave me paperwork." I signed. Ben blinked. "Wow. You good?" I nodded. "Better than I expected. They think they cut me off, but I haven't needed them for a long time." And that was the truth. While they were hosting cocktail fundraisers and managing declining foot traffic in their old-fashioned boutiques, I'd quietly built a thriving business. I didn't wear it on my sleeve. Didn't flaunt the numbers. But the numbers were there. Orders were stacked. Clients were loyal. Our waitlist for a custom build stretched 6 months out. One model, nicknamed the Magellan, had recently gone viral in a niche cycling forum. We'd handcrafted it from titanium alloy, matte black with a brushed finish and carbon fiber accents. A bike built for long-distance explorers and minimalist thrill seekers. The post blew up. Overnight, our inbox flooded, dozens of inquiries, then hundreds. Some were from boutique cycling shops in Europe and Japan asking about distribution. Others were from personal buyers offering deposits just to be added to the queue. It was more than we could have hoped for. That same night, I logged into our dashboard to check the data. Sales were spiking. Site traffic was 600% higher than the week before. And tucked between bulk order inquiries and customization requests were 3 messages that gave me pause. One from a journalist at a design magazine asking for an interview. One from a professional athlete, he wanted a custom touring frame for an upcoming world record attempt. And one anonymous message from a private collector offering an obscene amount of money for a one-off build, no specs, just a blank check in full creative control. I leaned back and stared at the screen. That meeting with my family felt like it had happened weeks ago. Already, it was fading into irrelevance. They'd wanted me to feel cut off. But how do you sever something that's already gone? The next morning, I met Josh at our usual spot. He was my business partner, my closest collaborator, and the one person who'd believed in my vision from the garage days. He was a little more intense than me, always forecasting 3 quarters ahead, always thinking scale. "You look like someone who just quit a government job," he said, sliding into the booth. I raised an eyebrow. "I signed out of the Galloway family." He grinned. "Wait, for real? Legal and everything." He whistled. "So what's next? Revenge arc?" "No," I said. "Just growth. Without obstacles." Josh opened his laptop. In that case, we've got something to talk about. He pulled up an email from one of our core suppliers. They were offering us an exclusive deal: lightweight composite frames in a new alloy blend they'd been developing with a firm out of Sweden. The catch? We'd need to commit to a much larger production run. Can we handle it? I asked. With the numbers we're seeing? Josh said. Easily. We're ready. Let's do it. He nodded, already typing. Done. The next few weeks were a blur, in the best way. The article came out. The journalist had written a glowing, full-page feature on the bike builder who walked away from wealth to create his own empire. There were photos of our workshop, a profile of our mission, and even quotes from a few of our early clients who had stayed fiercely loyal. It wasn't long before we started seeing the results. Online traffic doubled, then tripled. We picked up followers on social media, inquiries from overseas, and attention from 2 national retailers who wanted to carry our accessories and frames. We brought on 2 more full-time employees. Ben trained them personally, while I started drafting the next major product, a new line of commuter builds designed for design-conscious urban riders. Lightweight, foldable, easy to maintain, and built to last. Meanwhile, I didn't hear a word from my family. No calls. No follow-ups. Just silence. It didn't hurt. Not anymore. The truth was, I wasn't waiting for them. I was moving forward. And then, just as things were stabilizing, I got a message. From Eunice. Merritt, we need to talk. Family issue. Please. I didn't respond. Then Sterling. Let's meet. I think things got misinterpreted. That one made me laugh out loud. Misinterpreted? They sat there and watched me sign legal papers cutting all ties. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was intent. Messages kept coming. Lowell finally chimed in too. Yo, you around? Weird stuff happening. No details. No effort. Classic. But the message that made me pause, just for a second, was from my father. Come home. We need you. He didn't say what for. But the wording said everything. Come home. Not we'd like to talk. Not let's meet. He hadn't used the word home in years. For someone like my father, that was as close as he'd ever get to asking for help. I didn't answer. Not right away. I knew they'd escalate. They always did. A week after my dad's text, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I was in the workshop, adjusting a rear derailleur on a prototype, the kind of tedious work I loved: small, meticulous, meditative. I wiped the grease from my fingers and answered without much thought. Hello? There was a pause. Then, Merritt. It's Sterling. We need to talk. Of course. I glanced at Ben across the shop, who looked up, silently mouthing everything okay. I gave a small nod and turned away toward the back office. What do you want? I asked, not bothering to mask the fatigue in my voice. It's the business, Sterling said. We're hitting some turbulence. I almost laughed. That was the word he'd always used, turbulence, like he was a pilot steering a brand through clouds, not someone writing a legacy he never built. What kind of turbulence? I said. Our Q2 numbers are down. Store traffic's dried up. Inventory's collecting dust. Online sales have stalled. We're trying a few pivots. Pivots, I echoed. Sure. And what does that have to do with me? Sterling's voice lowered, less confident now. We think you could help. I leaned back in my chair and smirked. Oh, interesting. Last I checked, my choices didn't align with the family's vision. Your words, not mine. Merritt, let's not relive the past. No, let's, I said, cutting him off. Because I remember you watching me sign away my name and inheritance like I was a PR problem you were finally getting rid of. He exhaled sharply. Look, I won't pretend we handled it well. But the business is in trouble. Dad doesn't want to admit it. Neither does Eunice. But it's real. And we think you're the only one who can help us get back on track. There it was. Not apology. Not regret. Just desperation, repackaged as humility. I'm busy, I said. And not interested. Then I hung up. The next few days were quiet until they weren't. Eunice showed up at the workshop. It was a Wednesday. I was helping a client from Seattle test ride a custom-built gravel bike. And there she was, standing just outside the garage door, oversized sunglasses on, heels clicking against concrete like she'd walked onto the wrong movie set. I met her at the door. "Eunice." "Merritt," she said, giving a tight smile. "Do you have a minute?" "Barely. I'm working. This won't take long." She stepped inside, blinking at the open tool drawers, hanging wheels, and oil-stained floor. "So this is what you've been up to," she said. "Still not a phase," I replied. She turned to face me. "Look, I'll get to it. The family's struggling. We thought we had more time to evolve, but trends moved faster than expected. Online competitors are everywhere, and the stores are bleeding money. Sterling's trying to hold things together, but he's overwhelmed. Dad's different lately. Quiet. Stressed. I didn't say anything. We need help, Merritt. Real help. You've clearly figured things out here. Maybe you could bring that innovation back to the company." "Back?" I repeated. "You cut me out. Publicly. Deliberately." Her face tightened. "We made a mistake." "No, you made a choice," I said. "And now that it's inconvenient, you want to roll it back." Eunice looked down, for once not ready with a polished response. "Can we start over?" I walked past her and grabbed a wrench from the rack. "Start over?" I said. "If I came back, I'd run things my way. Not as a consultant. Not under your brand. Full control. You and Sterling work under me. No titles. No veto power." Her eyes widened. "You can't be serious." I looked at her flatly. "That's the deal." She opened her mouth to argue, but stopped. "I'll talk to the others." "You do that," I said. Then I turned back to my work. 2 days later, Dad showed up. He looked older than I remembered. His shirt was pressed, but the wear showed around his eyes. No posturing. No immediate pitch. Just, "Can we talk?" I nodded toward the benches in the back. We sat among shelves of tubing and spare parts. "I heard about your proposal," he said. "Not a proposal," I replied. "A condition." He nodded slowly. "You're asking for full control. That's not an easy thing to accept, Merritt. Your mother and I built that business from nothing. Then you should have protected it better." He flinched. I kept going. "You stayed loyal to a market that aged out. Refused to go digital when you had the chance. Pushed away the one person who could have adapted it." "We didn't see your potential," he said quietly. "That was our failure." We sat in silence for a moment. Then he added, "If I say yes, what happens to the family name?" "It stays," I said. "You built something real. The name still has value. But that's not what's going to save the business." He gave a slow nod. "Then we'll do it your way." I didn't wait. Within a week, I was in the CEO's chair. Sterling and Eunice sat beside me at the first all-staff meeting, but the difference was clear. I wasn't a guest. I was the one leading. We held the meeting in the main conference room of Galloway HQ. I could tell some of the staff weren't sure what to make of me. The quiet son. The one who left. The one they thought had failed. I stood at the front and got straight to the point. Let's be honest. The company's been drifting. And it's time to fix that. I clicked to the first slide, 3 bold words. No more nepotism. We're building a merit-based culture. Titles will mean something again. Creativity, not legacy, will be rewarded. If you have ideas, speak. If you felt overlooked, this is your chance. I pointed to the next slide. Outdated systems equals outdated results. We're overhauling everything. Inventory, store layouts, product design, branding. We're going lean, digital, and transparent. The old way wasn't bad, but it's not enough anymore. One manager raised her hand. And what about the Galloways? I looked toward Sterling and Eunice. They're employees now. Just like you. Everyone earns their place from this point forward. After the meeting, I toured every department. I spoke with store managers, designers, and even warehouse clerks. I wanted them to see I wasn't just another suit. They needed to trust that I understood their work, their pain points, their ideas. Then I made hard calls. Closed underperforming locations. Reallocated capital into digital infrastructure. Fired a few longtime executives who were stuck in the past. We partnered with modern designers to reimagine our collection's sleek, eco-conscious pieces with recycled metals and minimalist packaging. We overhauled the website, built an app, and launched pre-order drops with limited quantities to build demand. The response? Overwhelming. Sales surged. Press coverage poured in. And for the first time in a decade, the Galloway brand didn't feel like a relic. It felt relevant. But I wasn't doing this for them. Not really. I was doing it to prove something to myself. That I could rebuild the empire they thought I was unfit to inherit. And do it on my own terms. 6 months in, the company looked nothing like the one I inherited. The numbers spoke for themselves. Sales were up across every category. The new website broke previous records in its first 48 hours. 3 of our revitalized stores were featured in national design publications. And most satisfying of all? Customers were excited again. They weren't just buying products, they were buying into a vision. Our new collection, crafted from reclaimed metals and designed with input from younger, emerging artists, became a talking point in the industry. Even competitors began mimicking our layout and storytelling approach. The Galloway name had gone from stuffy and stagnant to something sleek, ethical, and future-focused. But even as all of that happened, I kept a boundary. Sterling and Eunice still worked at the company, but they didn't sit in on strategic decisions. Lowell kept managing our social media, where he did surprisingly well, probably because it required little interaction and a flair for aesthetics. And my father? He kept a respectful distance, popping in from time to time to observe meetings, but rarely speaking up. I think he knew his time as the voice of the company had passed. We weren't friends. We weren't suddenly a close-knit family. But we functioned. And sometimes, that was enough. Then came the trade event. It was one of the most high-profile design showcases in the country, where major players in fashion, accessories, and lifestyle brands gathered to reveal their latest innovations. We were invited to host a full-scale exhibit. I led the design myself, nothing flashy, just clean lines, honest storytelling, and our new signature collection displayed in floating glass panels. The space had a quiet energy to it. Focused. Precise. By the end of the first day, word had spread. People came not just to browse, but to ask questions. Buyers from Europe wanted exclusives. A startup from Australia pitched a sustainability campaign. Even a luxury tech firm asked about a collaboration. I kept my answers clear, my tone calm. This wasn't my moment to gloat. It was my moment to lead. My family was there watching from the edge of the booth. And this time, I didn't feel judged. I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the outcast. I felt like the one who finally saw the whole picture. A week later, we had our quarterly review. I presented the numbers. They were the best the company had ever posted. When I finished, the room was silent for a few seconds until my dad cleared his throat. Merritt, he said. I know we haven't always seen eye to eye. But I want to say, I'm proud of you. I nodded. Thanks. He wasn't finished. You didn't just save this company. You rebuilt it into something stronger. And I know that couldn't have been easy. Sterling chimed in, more sincere than I expected. You proved us wrong. You earned this. Eunice gave a small smile. You always knew where things were going. We just couldn't see it. There was a long pause. Then my dad said something I never thought I'd hear. We've been talking. And we'd like to fix things. Not just at work. With the family. I looked around the room. It would have been easy to accept. To fall back into the idea that we were one big happy family now. But I'd learned something over the last few years. Love, respect, and trust, those things aren't tied to last names. They're earned. Maintained. Proved over time. I appreciate that, I said. But I'm not interested in rewriting the past. This, I gestured to the office, this works. We're colleagues. That's enough. Merritt, Sterling said, almost pleading. We're still your family. I stood. Calm. Firm. You were my family, I said. Then you made me sign something that said otherwise. I don't hold that against you. But I won't pretend it didn't happen. They didn't argue. Because they couldn't. I gathered my notes. I'll keep building this company. I'll work with you. But outside these walls, we're good as we are. No performances. No forced holidays. Just honesty. And then I walked out of the room. Not with anger. Not with sadness. With peace. That evening, I returned to the workshop. The space was quiet, just how I liked it. I sat alone at the bench, hands resting on a frame I hadn't finished. This wasn't just where my business started. It was where I started. A boy who wanted to build. A man who learned that sometimes walking away is the most powerful thing you can do. They called me the failure. The one who didn't belong. The one who didn't fit the mold. Turns out, I was never supposed to. I wasn't the black sheep. I was the blueprint. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.